The polished mahogany of Charles Henderson's desk swallowed the light, cold, sterile final. One moment I'm reviewing Q3 numbers. The next, he slides a folder labeled Steve Mitchell. Transition plan across the glassy surface. My stomach drops. Sir? What's this? I flip it open. Standard HR fluff, until paragraph 3. Steve Mitchell will train Connor Vance for 4 weeks. Following transition, employment terminated. The words terminated and Connor Vance blur. My breath vanishes. Train him? Then fired. Henderson stares out at Manhattan, avoiding my eyes. Board's decision. Connor's the new direction. Fresh blood. 30 years. Building Morrison Industries from nothing. All dismissed as old. Humiliation burns my throat. Connor? He's a kid. Henderson finally meets my gaze blank. He's eager. Start Monday. That's when the betrayal crystallized. Not just the firing, but forcing me to arm my own executioner. And in that suffocating silence, kneeling on his plush carpet, revenge took root. Quiet. Cold. Unstoppable. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment, letting me know where you are viewing from. Kindly hit the like and subscribe to hear more real stories about family loyalty and betrayal. They might just change how you see your own relationships. My name is Steve Mitchell. I'm 53. 30 years ago, fresh out of college with a business degree and a handshake, I walked into Henderson & Company as a junior sales rep. I worked my way up, learned the ropes, bled for the company. I became the top sales manager, consistently smashing targets. My team respected me. Why? Because I knew the clients, not just their accounts. I knew Mr. Morrison's love for classic cars, that Mrs. Chun needed flexibility for her philanthropic work, that the Jacobs family needed reliability after their factory fire. I built relationships, brick by brick, call by call, handshake by handshake. It wasn't just a job, it was my identity. My father always said, build loyalty, Steve, and you build security. I believe that. I live that. My security? A mortgage on a comfortable but modest home in the suburbs, tuition for my daughter's last year of college, and a pension plan that felt suddenly fragile. My legacy? The Morrison Industries account. Our biggest. Our lifeblood. I'd nurtured it for 15 years, watched it grow from a mid-sized concern to a global powerhouse that relied on my team, my service, me. That legacy was supposed to be my shield. The initial shock in Henderson's office mutated into a slow, corrosive burn. Monday morning arrived, a gray, drizzly September day that mirrored my mood. Connor Vance was waiting outside his office. Tall, impossibly young, wearing a slightly too big grin and an expensive, ill-fitting suit. Mr. Mitchell. So excited to learn from the legend, he chirped, extending a hand that felt unnervingly smooth. Legend. The word tasted like ash. For the next 4 weeks, I was forced to play mentor. I showed him the CRM system, explained client histories, introduced him to my team. Their nervous glances tore at me, and gritted my teeth as he spouted off simplistic solutions using jargon I barely understood. He seemed to grasp things quickly, but it was surface level, devoid of the deep understanding and trust I'd painstakingly cultivated. He was a parrot, repeating buzzwords. Every fiber of my being screamed to tell him where to shove his disruptive innovation. But I had to play the game. I had to train him. The humiliation was constant, a low hum beneath the forced professionalism. My office felt smaller, my chair less comfortable, the view from my window, the view I'd earned, now a reminder of what was being stolen. Then came the Friday. For weeks to the day. Henderson called me back to his office. The folder was still on his desk, now with a termination letter dated that day. Effective immediately, Steve. The words were like ice water. But, Connor, I just spent 4 weeks. Henderson actually had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. The board accelerated the timeline. Connor feels he has a good grasp. Your severance package is outlined there. He slid another document over. It was insultingly standard, barely covering 2 months of mortgage payments. 30 years reduced to a severance package smaller than my annual bonus used to be. The finality crushed me. I staggered out, my box of personal effects, a coffee mug, a framed photo of my family, some awards, feeling absurdly light yet leaden with shame. As the security guard escorting me past Connor's new office, I saw him already sitting behind my desk, legs crossed, talking loudly on the phone, a smug, self-satisfied smirk on his face. He didn't even look up. The door closed behind me, and I was outside in the cold, my career and my dignity in a cardboard box on the rainy sidewalk. The setup was complete. The betrayal was total. But even as I stood there, rain soaking my jacket, my mind raced. I couldn't let this go. I wasn't just losing a job, I was losing my life's work. The Morrison account, the relationships I'd built, the trust I'd earned, it all felt like it was being ripped away. I'd spent decades building something that meant something. And now, in a single moment, it was gone. I thought about my daughter, Julia, who was graduating this spring. Her tuition was due in a few weeks. My wife, Linda, who had put up with my long hours and missed family dinners. I thought about the mortgage, the savings that had been eroded by the slow, steady erosion of my job security. This wasn't just about me. It was about them. I walked to my car, the weight of the box in my hands heavy with more than just physical items. I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the steering wheel. My hands trembled. I wanted to scream, to throw the box, to tear the folder to shreds. But I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to think. I needed to understand. Why? Why now? Why him? That night, I sat at the kitchen table, the box open in front of me. Linda was in the living room, watching TV, her face lit by the glow of the screen. I didn't want to burden her, but I knew I had to. They fired me, I said, my voice quiet. She turned off the TV, her eyes narrowing. What? Why? I told her the story, the meeting, the folder, the meeting with Connor. She listened, her face a mix of shock and anger. That's not right, Steve. You've given them everything. She reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. We'll figure this out. But I wasn't sure. The next day, I called my old friend Mark, a former colleague who had moved into corporate law. Hey Mark, I said, my voice low. I need to talk to you. He agreed to meet at a local cafe. When I arrived, he looked up from his coffee, his brow furrowed. Steve, you look like hell. I sat down, ordering a black coffee. I got fired. They told me to train my replacement, then let me go. He leaned forward. Who's the replacement? I hesitated. Connor Vance. His eyes widened. Vance? That kid? He's not even qualified. I nodded. He's connected. Henderson's nephew, I think. Mark's expression darkened. That's not just bad business. That's nepotism. They're replacing you because they're trying to protect their own. I felt the anger bubble up again. What do I do? He sighed. You need to find out the full story. There's more here than meets the eye. That evening, I sat at my laptop, searching for anything on Connor Vance. I found his LinkedIn profile, which was sparse and oddly generic. No real experience, just a string of vague job titles. Then I found a news article about Henderson and Company mentioning a strategic restructuring and a new digital transformation initiative. The article mentioned Connor as a key player. I felt a chill. This wasn't just about replacing me. It was about reshaping the company, and they were doing it by favoring family over experience. The next day, I went to the office one last time. I stopped by my old desk, the one that had been my sanctuary for years. I picked up the coffee mug, the one I'd gotten from my team on my 10th anniversary. It was a small thing, but it felt like a piece of me. I put it in the box. Then I walked through the office, past the cubicles, the conference rooms, the break room where I'd shared countless lunches with colleagues. I saw the faces of people I'd worked with for years. Some of them, I knew, had been loyal to me. But now, they were watching as I was replaced by a kid with a suit and a smile. When I left, I felt a strange mix of emotions, grief, anger, determination. I wasn't going to let this happen without a fight. I had spent 30 years building something that mattered. I wasn't going to let it all be taken away. I needed to find out the truth, and I needed to take action. But for now, I had to survive. I had to protect my family. That night, I sat on the couch, the box beside me. Linda was beside me, her head on my shoulder. We'll get through this, she said softly. I nodded, but inside, I was already thinking about what came next. The betrayal had been a blow, but it had also awakened something in me. I wasn't just a sales manager. I was a man who had been wronged, and I wasn't going to let that go unanswered. The first week after being fired was a blur of shock and numbness, punctuated by moments of white-hot rage. I updated my resume, but who hires a 53-year-old sales manager when the market is flooded with digital natives? The severance felt like a cruel joke. Calls to my old contacts felt hollow, forced. Pride kept me from begging. Then my wife, Linda, sat me down. "Steve, the savings are gone. Julia's tuition is due next month. We need a plan." Her practical worry, born from love but laced with fear, was the slap I needed. This wasn't just about me and my hurt pride anymore. It was about my family's security. My loyalty had been exploited. My livelihood ripped away. I had to know why. Mark helped me dig deeper. We accessed the company's public filings, easy to find. Connor Vance was listed as a strategic advisor before being promoted over me. His LinkedIn profile, hastily created, boasted credentials that seemed inflated, experiences that didn't add up. The anger that had been simmering exploded. It wasn't just betrayal, it was corruption, nepotism masquerading as progress. My decades of service meant nothing next to family ties. The emotional stakes shifted from personal humiliation to a burning need for justice. I felt not just fired, but disrespected, devalued, and used. The humiliation of training the kid who stole my job from nepotism was now mixed with a fierce desire to expose the rot at Henderson and Company's core. My rage needed a target, and Henderson and Connor were it. But how? I needed leverage. But the deeper I dug, the more I realized the stakes were higher than I'd imagined. I called Mark again, this time with a new urgency. What if they're not just replacing me? What if they're trying to control the entire industry? He frowned. "You're not wrong. Henderson and Company has been consolidating power for years. They're not just a sales company, they're a gatekeeper. If they lose Morrison, it's a domino effect." I felt the weight of his words. This wasn't just about me. It was about the entire industry. I had to act, but I needed more than just a plan. I needed proof. That night, I sat at my laptop, poring over files, emails, and financial reports. I found a series of internal memos that hinted at a larger scheme. Henderson and Company was restructuring not just for efficiency, but to eliminate competition. The Morrison account was a linchpin in their strategy, and by replacing me, they were ensuring that no one else could challenge their dominance. It was a calculated move, and I was the first casualty. The emotional toll was immense. I felt like I was being pulled apart by the weight of it all. I thought about my family, about the life I had built, and the life I was about to lose. But I also thought about the people who had been loyal to me, the colleagues who had trusted me, the clients who had relied on me. I couldn't let them down. I called James Morrison again, this time with more urgency. "James, I need to talk to you. There's something you should know." He hesitated, then agreed to meet. When we met, I laid it all out. Henderson and Company isn't just replacing me. They're trying to take over the entire industry. They're using their connections to eliminate competition, and the Morrison account is their next target. If they lose it, it's not just a financial blow, it's a strategic one. He listened, his face unreadable. "You're saying this is a conspiracy?" I nodded. "It's more than that. It's a power play. They think they can control everything, but they're wrong." He leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "Steve, I've seen a lot in my career, but this is different. If what you're saying is true, we need to act." The next step was clear. I had to expose the truth. But how? I needed allies, but I also needed to be careful. The more I uncovered, the more dangerous it became. I couldn't afford to make enemies of people who could help me. That night, I sat on the couch, staring at the ceiling. The weight of the world felt heavier than ever. But I also felt a flicker of hope. I wasn't just a victim of betrayal. I was a player in a much larger game. And I was ready to fight. A week later, I was scrolling mindlessly online, wallowing in self-pity, when I saw it. An Instagram post from Connor Vance. Tagged at my old office, but the picture showed him lounging on a sun-drenched yacht, a cocktail in hand, a dazzlingly ugly supercar gleaming behind him. The caption, "Living the dream. Big things coming. Hashtag new beginnings, hashtag Henderson Co." The betrayal reached a new, vile depth. That yacht, that car, that was my bonus money. Money generated by my sweat, my relationships, my Morrison account. He was flaunting wealth stolen from the work that had just gotten me fired. He wasn't just taking my job, He was living the high life on the fruits of my labor while my family worried about bills. Seeing him there so smug, so utterly undeserving, was the breaking point. The enough is enough moment crystallized. The internal rage that had been simmering exploded into a firestorm. My internal monologue turned into a battle cry. This ends now. The plan wasn't hatched in the heat of the moment. It was born from decades of unseen work. It wasn't malicious revenge, but the assertion of my real worth. I picked up the phone, not to beg, but to call James Morrison, the CEO of Morrison Industries. We didn't have the kind of relationship where we played golf every week, but we had history. I'd been the one to navigate their complex logistics crisis years ago. I'd been the one who flew across the country to meet him when his original supplier failed, ensuring his factory didn't shut down. We shared a mutual respect built on reliability and results, not buzzwords. I heard you moved on, Steve. James Morrison's gravelly voice came through. No small talk. Direct. Heard it was forced. Sorry to see you go. Thank you, James, I said, keeping my voice steady. It was unexpected, but it gives me a chance to explore new opportunities. Actually, that's why I'm calling. I'm joining a boutique firm specialized in complex industrial partnerships. Very agile, very focused on long-term client relationships. I paused, letting the implications sink in. Made me think about some of the partnerships I'd built over the years. Like ours. Wondered if you'd ever consider diversifying your supply chain partners? Maybe get a competitive bid process going. I wasn't lying. I was exploring options. But the message was clear. I had value, and I was offering it elsewhere. Morrison Industries was Henderson & Company's biggest client because of me. If I left, the relationship left with me. It was my ace in the hole, the product of 30 years of genuine relationship building. The plan was simple. Leverage my integrity and my connections against their corruption. I would take what they valued most, the Morrison account, not out of spite, but because I deserved better than their betrayal. The trap was set, baited with the very success they had taken for granted. But the plan wasn't just about revenge. It was about proving a point. Henderson & Company had always prided itself on being innovative, but their innovation was nothing more than a facade. They replaced experienced professionals with unproven, well-connected individuals, all while claiming to be disrupting the industry. I was going to show them what real disruption looked like. I wasn't just walking away from them. I was walking into a future where my value was recognized, not discarded. The next step was to formalize my transition. I called Apex Global Solutions, the boutique firm I had been considering. Their CEO, a former colleague named Rachel Lang, was intrigued by my proposal. "Steve, your track record speaks for itself," she said. "If you're willing to join us, we'd be honored." I accepted, not just for the opportunity, but for the symbolic act of leaving Henderson & Company behind. As I prepared for my new role, I began reaching out to my contacts at Morrison Industries. I scheduled meetings not as a vendor, but as a partner. I emphasized the importance of long-term relationships, of understanding their needs beyond the transactional. I reminded them of the years I'd spent building trust, of the challenges we'd overcome together. I didn't need to be aggressive. I simply needed to be present. Meanwhile, I kept a close eye on Henderson & Company. Mark's information had been invaluable. I learned that Connor Vance was struggling to keep up with the demands of the role. He lacked the depth of experience, the ability to navigate the complexities of the industry. His arrogance was his downfall. I watched as he made mistakes, as he dismissed the concerns of key clients, as he failed to deliver on the promises he'd made. Each misstep was a reminder of how unprepared he was for the responsibility he'd been given. The emotional stakes were high. I felt the weight of every decision, every move I made. But I also felt a sense of purpose. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the people who had been wronged by Henderson & Company. It was about the industry that had been corrupted by greed and nepotism. I wasn't just fighting for my own survival. I was fighting for the integrity of the entire field. The final piece of the plan was to ensure that Morrison Industries knew the truth. I arranged a meeting with James Morrison, this time with more urgency. "James," I said, "there's something you need to know. Henderson & Company isn't just replacing me. They're trying to take over the entire industry. They're using their connections to eliminate competition, and the Morrison account is their next target. If they lose it, it's not just a financial blow, it's a strategic one. He listened, his face unreadable. You're saying this is a conspiracy? I nodded. It's more than that. It's a power play. They think they can control everything, but they're wrong. He leaned back, his expression thoughtful. Steve, I've seen a lot in my career, but this is different. If what you're saying is true, we need to act. The plan was in motion. I had set the stage, and now the time had come to play the final act. I wasn't just leaving Henderson and Company. I was leaving them in ruins. And as I prepared for the next chapter of my life, I felt a sense of clarity. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice, about proving that true value couldn't be bought with a family connection or a fancy title. It was about showing the world that loyalty, integrity, and experience were worth more than any corporate power play. The following weeks were a masterclass in subtle pressure. I didn't slam doors. I opened new ones. I formally accepted a role as a senior consultant with Apex Global Solutions, a smaller, highly specialized firm known for white-glove service and deep industry expertise. The antithesis of Connor's digital native hot air. My first call was to James Morrison. We met for coffee, not as vendor and client, but as two professionals discussing mutual needs. I presented Apex's capabilities, emphasizing flexibility and long-term partnership. Things Henderson and Company, under Connor's shallow leadership, was rapidly abandoning. I didn't badmouth Henderson. I simply showcased a better alternative. I leveraged every connection, every shared experience with Morrison personnel, reinforcing trust built over 15 years. It wasn't a hard sell. It was a natural evolution, a move to a partner who valued the relationship as much as the transaction. The confrontation came during the crucial quarterly review meeting between Henderson and Company and Morrison Industries. Connor, relying on outdated briefs and arrogance, presented a flashy, tech-heavy overhaul of the supply agreement that completely ignored Morrison's specific, critical operational needs. He spoke over concerns, used jargon that impressed no one, and visibly dismissed Mrs. Chun, a key procurement officer whose family foundation Morrison supported. James Morrison sat through it, his face a mask of polite indifference. When Connor finished, the silence was deafening. James cleared his throat. Thank you, Connor. Interesting vision. He turned to Henderson. Charles, we've appreciated our long partnership with Henderson and Company. My stomach clenched. Here it comes. But after this review, James continued, his voice calm but final, and after Steve's recent outreach, we've decided to proceed with Apex Global Solutions for our next phase. They presented a plan that actually listens to our operational realities. Something your team, quite frankly, seemed to have forgotten. Henderson's face drained of color. Connor's mouth hung open, the smugness replaced by utter, stunned disbelief. James, we can. Henderson stammered, but the damage was done. Morrison stood, shook Henderson's hand curtly, ignored Connor, and walked out. The immediate fallout was catastrophic. Henderson and Company's stock plummeted. The board, furious at the loss of their crown jewel, demanded explanations. Connor was fired within the hour, his expensive suit and yacht post deleted frantically. Henderson himself was forced into early resignation a week later. The vultures were already circling the dying company. The execution was clean, professional, and devastatingly effective. I didn't gloat. I simply watched the foundation I'd built endure, while their house of cards, built on nepotism and disrespect, collapsed. But the fallout wasn't just financial. It was personal. I received a call from a former colleague, Lisa, who had worked with me for over a decade. Steve, she said, her voice trembling. I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. I didn't know they were planning this. I didn't blame her. She had been a loyal employee just like me. But the truth was, the company had always prioritized family over loyalty. I felt a pang of sadness for the people who had been caught in the crossfire. They had been victims too, just like I had. The next day, I received a call from my wife, Linda. Steve, she said, her voice filled with relief. I heard what happened. I'm so proud of you. I smiled, but I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The company had lost its biggest client, but it wasn't the end of their problems. There were still other clients, other contracts, other relationships that had been neglected. I had to make sure that the lessons learned from this experience weren't forgotten. As I sat in my new office at Apex Global Solutions, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. I had spent 30 years building something that mattered, and now I was in a position to build something even greater. I wasn't just a sales manager anymore. I was a leader, a strategist, a partner. The experience had changed me. I had learned that true value wasn't measured in titles or salaries, but in the relationships you built and the integrity you maintained. The next day, I called James Morrison again. "James," I said, "I just wanted to thank you for trusting me. I know this wasn't an easy decision, but I'm glad you chose to move forward with Apex. I'll do everything I can to ensure that your partnership with us is as strong as it was with Henderson and Company." He chuckled. "Steve, I've always known you were a good guy. I just hope the rest of the industry learns from this." I hung up the phone, feeling a sense of fulfillment. This wasn't just about me. It was about the industry, about the people who had been wronged, about the values that had been lost. I had taken a stand, and I had won, but I knew that the fight wasn't over. There would always be those who tried to exploit others for their own gain. But I also knew that there were people like James Morrison, like Lisa, who believed in integrity and hard work. As I looked out the window of my new office, I felt a sense of peace. The rain had stopped, and the sun was beginning to shine through the clouds. I had faced the betrayal, the humiliation, the loss, and I had come out stronger. I had proven that loyalty, experience, and integrity were worth more than any corporate power play. The next day, I received a call from Mark. "Steve," he said, "I heard about the Morrison deal. That was brilliant." I smiled. "Thanks, Mark. I just did what I had to do." He chuckled. "You always did. But this time it was different. You didn't just fight for yourself. You fought for everyone who had been wronged." I felt a wave of gratitude. The journey had been tough, but it had also been rewarding. I had learned that sometimes the greatest victories weren't about winning, but about standing up for what was right. And as I prepared for the next chapter of my life, I knew that I was ready for whatever came next. 6 months later, the landscape was irrevocably changed. Apex Global Solutions, propelled by the Morrison account and my deep expertise, was thriving. I wasn't just a consultant. I was a partner, valued for my experience, my network, my integrity. The mortgage was paid, Julia's graduation was joyful, and Linda could finally breathe. The satisfaction wasn't just in the success, but in the validation. My worth wasn't in a title bestowed by corrupt management. It was in the relationships I'd built and the expertise I'd honed over decades. Henderson and Company filed for Chapter 11. Reports surfaced of internal chaos, mass layoffs, and frantic, failed attempts to win back other clients who had lost faith after Morrison left. Connor Vance vanished, a footnote in a corporate failure story, his silver spoon career cut short by his own incompetence and sense of entitlement. Charles Henderson surfaced working for a small, struggling competitor, a stark fall from his Manhattan penthouse and boardroom power. The final twist? It wasn't just revenge. James Morrison called me 3 months after the transition. "Steve," he said, "this wasn't just about better service. We saw how they treated you, how they treated their people. We saw the rot. We wanted no part of that. Loyalty matters." Henderson and Company hadn't just lost a client. They'd lost their soul, and their biggest client had seen it and acted accordingly. Karma wasn't just Connor losing his job. It was the entire company collapsing under the weight of its own corrupted values. Standing on the terrace of Apex's modest but modern offices, looking out at the city, I felt a profound sense of closure. The anger was gone, replaced by a quiet certainty. They thought they could discard me, use me, and replace my loyalty with nepotism. They forgot that real value isn't in the job title, but in the trust you build and the work you do with integrity. They forgot the man behind the title, Steve Mitchell, and that far more than their bankruptcy was the sweetest revenge. I picked up my phone, scrolling through contacts, not for old enemies, but for new opportunities built on honesty. Some bridges, once burned, leave you standing on solid ground you never knew you had. "On to the next one," I murmured, the city lights twinkling like possibilities. My legacy wasn't tied to a failing company. It was right here, in the relationships I valued and the work I did right. Thank you for spending your time with my story. Feel free to share your thoughts or reactions in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.